Good afternoon. It's Friday, December 7th. Get my month straight. Today I am chooching on my, can you see this? It's a Hilson Avanti 220 Belgian. It's a bent sitter briar. Interesting shape, it's square. The one disadvantage to the shape of this bowl is that it gets hot quicker than normal round bowls. And it can be quite uncomfortable to hold at times, even if I'm just really sipping slow. So I ended up just kind of holding it in the corners when this happens. Otherwise, it's a beautiful pipe. I like it a lot. And I am chooching on Hearth and Home Chatham Manor. This was recommended to me by a YouTuber that I had watched a long time ago, whose name I cannot remember, I apologize. And he had recommended it for beginners, and I bought it quite a while ago, and it's been kind of cellared, so I'm just going through it now. Today, I want to talk about how I migrated from the West Coast to the East Coast. 1983, well, I'll remember the Challenger blowing up. It was a terrible day. I remember I had stayed home that day from middle school to watch it. I was a very big Shuttle fan then. And the reason why is because one of the reasons why is my dad was working on a West Coast launch site, Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, where they sometimes do the SpaceX launches from now. They were building a launch facility for the shuttle. It was called Slick 6, SLC, Space Launch Complex 6. When the Challenger blew up, Congress halted production or construction of that launch site on the West Coast. I guess they figured since they were down one shuttle, they didn't need two launch sites. The purpose of the launch site was to launch the shuttle into polar orbits, and a lot of missiles that get launched from Vandenberg in the past and even today are launched into polar orbit from that location on the West Coast. So they decided to suspend construction and eventually canceled construction of that site. There were 3,000 engineers working on that project that were suddenly laid off and had no job. So this was the middle of my senior year of high school. And my dad tried his hardest to find something local that could still support the family and allow me to stay and graduate from high school. Didn't happen. So what ended up is the FAA on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. picked him up. And next thing I knew, I was moving to Maryland. And at the time, I remember thinking, what is Maryland? And I remember looking on a map and seeing how small the state was compared to California. I was such a huge state, used to living in such a huge state. I don't want to say it wasn't too much of a terrible culture shock, because it was. West Coast to East Coast is a huge culture shock. I remember I just started driving. Not too long I've been driving. And the difference in driving habits was very noticeable. Would I go back to California? Probably not. I haven't even gone back to any of my high school reunions, which leads me to continuing on the story. When I moved to Maryland, I was in this middle year of my high school, so I ended up transferring with one semester left to graduate into a brand new school. Didn't know anybody. So the cool thing that both schools, my old school and new school did, was to allow me to take classes under the California curriculum so that I would be able to graduate in California. So one of the differences between California and Maryland coursework was this is back in '87, was that government is taught in your senior class in California, but your freshman class in Maryland. So I ended up in a classroom full of freshmen for my government class. Other than that, it was no big deal. I finished the semester. I flew back to California at the end. I stayed the summer with my then girlfriend and ended up graduating from high school and walking on stage with all the people that I went to high school with. So yeah, it was an interesting time in my life. I felt very uprooted, but in hindsight, I think it was a good move. I like Maryland. I like all 4 seasons are definitively displayed by nature. You definitely feel spring, summer, fall, and winter. And I just like the East Coast. I know West Coast seems strange to me now. I've been thinking about different segments that I'm going to start talking about. And some of the things that I'm going to be talking about coming up. I lived 8 years in a haunted house that was very haunted, so I have a lot of stories about that. And I'm thinking about doing little segments of the Spanish language for pipe smokers, like specific things we talk about, specific things that we have. Teach a little bit of Spanish. I am definitely not fluent in Spanish, but I know enough to not get by anything. But having a mother who speaks fluent Spanish, it's easy to fake it. And I like the Spanish language. It fascinates me. I've just never had... she never taught me when I was little. And I never had a reason to learn it. But as I've gotten older, and I am much closer to 50 than I am 40, I'd like to learn the Spanish language and pick it up, and I'd like to go back to my homeland and visit more, Puerto Rico. So yeah, I think I'll be teaching you guys some Spanish, talking about some stories when I lived in a haunted house. And let me tell you, these reality shows of haunted houses where people talk about their experiences is complete bullshit. The stuff they talk about that happens, it's not like that. It's still scary, but a lot of it is very overblown. I used to make beer. I made beer for a long time and recently stopped. Probably within the last 3 years I stopped. Got really into it. Was actually a beer competition judge. But it was taking up way too much time to make beer. I still enjoy imbibing beer. In fact, just recently picked up this Goose Island Bourbon County Imperial Stout, which is about 14% alcohol. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't remember what it was. But this is 2018, and I think I'm going to... I bought 2 of them, and I drank one right away. Imbibed it with my bride. And this other one I'm going to cellar for about a year and drink it Christmas time. So I'm going to hold on to that. But yeah, I've got some stories for beer. Other than that, I think it's enough for today. I'm going to go, like I said yesterday, I'm off today. I'm on my every other Friday off from work because I work 9 hours a day. And I think I'm going to take the dog for a walk because it's a really nice day. I think I'm going to do that now. So, you guys keep on chooching, and I'll see you next time.